and they lived on a plantation in Mississippi where Mr. McNeil was the foreman. He died one morning while driving Ernie, or Bud, to the school at age 9. He had said to his little boy, "Bud, I've got the awfulest headache," and he leaned over the steering wheel dead. He and his mother then moved the family to, quote, the poor farm, which was one of the penitentiaries in Arkansas, near Little Rock. His granddaddy was warden there and was shot and killed by one of the prisoners in 1947. The family moved to Little Rock on 10th Street. When Ernie returned from World War II, where he had served as a clerk at the rank of sergeant, he told many stories about being on Guam when the war was over. He and Joe met in Little Rock Junior College in 1947 and were married on June 12, 1948. Ernie worked at Fort Roots Psychiatric Hospital in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and that's where he was inspired to go into medicine. They spent 2 years together in Little Rock before their first child was born. It was Linda Diane. All of my children were named by their middle name except for Susie, and we'll get into that later. Diane was born February the 25th, 1950. The beginning of a family of 5. Joe had a lot to learn about ducks. First, the opening day of duck season was and usually is around November 17th, which is Joe's birthday. Forget presents, parties, anything else. We just celebrate ducks. Many tears were shed by Joe, but she did not know that Ernie's true love was a greenhead, a mallard, or a quack-quack, until he took her for her first hunting trip to Bayou Meto, or the Great Freeze-Out. Whatever you want to call it, from that point on, Joe stayed at home. But she learned a lot of things to do between November, December, and January. She also learned to cook ducks, dove, geese, pheasants, anything else that flew. And the family didn't even know what a turkey was. When Diane married her first husband, he asked what was to be served at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and she said, "What's a turkey?" She had never seen one. Just ducks for dinner is all we knew. But Ernie was good enough to pluck the feathers and get the duck guts out of the duck. But Ernie was good enough, the family spent a couple of years in West Virginia right after that, while Ernie worked as an administrator and worked in the operating room of the coal miners' hospitals. That was both in Williamson, West Virginia, and in Huntington Hospital in Huntington, West Virginia. From here, he joined the Army as a first lieutenant, and his first assignment was Fitzsimmons General Hospital in Denver, Colorado. At this time, the Army decided to train men who had been nurses, which Ernie got his training in Hot Springs, Arkansas, as a registered nurse, before moving to West Virginia. But the Army trained them in anesthesia. They had trained women before, but felt men had a calmer outlook. Ernie was 1 out of 5 men in the whole U.S. Army to be chosen to learn to become a male nurse anesthetist. He took his training at Fitzsimmons, and then we moved to Columbus, Georgia for his internship. From there, we went to Vicenza, Italy, where we had Joseph. The family got to tour Europe and other wonderful things, and the next assignment was Tacoma, Washington, where we had Andy. That was I've forgotten. Then Ernie left us for Vietnam. That means 5 children, one of them an infant, and no house. They called me one morning and said the house had been sold, I had to move. Had forgotten to mention that Susie was born actually in Kentucky because West Virginia and Kentucky come together and the road runs right along the line. And on the way to the hospital, I said all of my children had been named by their middle names: Carl Joseph, John Andrew, Linda Diane, Ernest Tyler. And we got to Susie, and I was on the way to the hospital, and all I could think of was gold letters on her luggage. Her name was to be Amanda Susan Shulman. I quickly changed my mind and named her Susan Ellen, the only one that went by her first name. We had added Ty in Little Rock, and Joe was born in Italy. Diane owns a fitting creation, which is the name of her business. She is #1 couture in the state of Indiana. Instead of college, Diane wanted, before her sewing, she wanted to go to New York City and dance with the Robert Joffrey Ballet Company. She went for a year and decided to come home. She married Mike Fuhrer, who works for and is one of the, I'll just say, high moguls. Does that fit you, Mike? High moguls?
He's a high mogul.
At Thermal King of Indiana. And right after that, Ty married Cheryl Kellogg, a precious darling from Charleston, West Virginia. South Carolina, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm reading another line here. Ty retired from the Air Force after returning his time for his scholarship. He still works for the Air Force at Warner Robins in Georgia. He has been retired one time and is working for them again. Cheryl is ready for her retirement. But before we get there, we had #1, Nathan. That's my one grandchild. And Nathan is shooting for a doctorate, I do believe. We'll have to wait and see. But he's already has a paper written and is ready for publication. His subject is nuclear physicist. Is that am I right?
Nuclear engineering.
Nuclear engineering. Excuse me. Okay, I couldn't remember anything for a while. Let me see. Susie spent her life singing. She was on the stage all the time. One of her best friends was Jay Thompson, who wrote Once Upon a Mattress. Have you all seen Once Upon a Mattress? That introduced Carol Burnett.
To the
They
world.
called Jay about a year ago and said, we want to produce the play again in New York, and wanted Susie to go to try out. Susie didn't have the money, said, Jay, I can't go. Jay said, I'm paying for it. I'm still going. You're still going. She went, she tried out, she was #2, but they went to the party afterwards. Someone in the party said, well, Jay, how did you like Once Upon a Mattress the second time around? He said everything was wonderful, except if you had had Susie Shulman, you would run for 10 years. That's quite a compliment.
Yeah.
She has also sung at Carnegie Hall. She was also on the network's Worst Cooks. She did not win. She didn't win.
No.
Joe is a registered dietitian and a caretaker of little old me. He has saved my life literally 2 times. Also, Joe has his own web development company. He is our fourth, I guess, favorite. Diane's #1, Ty's #2, Susan's #3, and Andy is
5.
still, he's here. He's here somewhere.
Right here, Mama.
But Andy will tell you if he's the favorite. I have to stop and tell you this. I have a new device in my house. Joe is very conscious of my security, but not only my physical security, but my health. And I have a small unit in Joe and Terry's house. And Joe came in with a new little gadget about this big. It has a camera and a speakerphone on it. And he set it up on the mantle. He can see anybody that's on the other side with their computer can see what I'm doing and see that I am secure
And talk to you.
and talk to me. Well, about 2 weeks ago, I had it for about 2 days, and I hear a voice say, "Good morning." It like scared me to death. Then he said, "This is God."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, that's Andy." You know, I mean. So it's a scary device, but I am more secure. Andy is a salesman for Silhouette Eyewear. He has been #1 in the United States for 4 years running.
That's pretty good.
The Lord had no doubt in what I wanted. I started out wanting 9 children. I had the 5 that I've got. I was blessed with Terry and Daryl and Cheryl and Cheryl and Mike. I've got 9 children. After retirement, Ernie continued to pass gas. Susie wants to tell us a story about passing gas.
Okay, well, I went to first grade in Vicenza, Italy, and before I went to first grade that morning, Mom set us down, at the kitchen table and said, "Now, Susie, they're going to ask you when you go into class who you are, what your daddy's rank is, and what he does for the Army." That was typical, evidently. And your dad is an anesthetist, and he gives people this gas that puts them to sleep. And I know you can't say anesthetist, so just explain that he gives people gas, and they go to sleep, and, it's in the operating room. So sure enough, the teacher comes around and says, "And who are you?" And I said, "My name is Susie Showman. My dad's Captain Ernie Showman, and he passes gas." So my first day of school, I went to the principal's office.
Oh, no.
Tyler, you want to tell them about our trip from Tacoma, Washington to Little Rock, Arkansas? I'd never pulled a trailer in my life, but they had sold my house and I had to move. Tyler was my mechanic on the trip.
Oh, well, since I was like mechanically inclined, it was my job to basically set up the trailer and break it down after we were ready to leave. And one morning we were in, I think it was like somewhere in Kansas. We were about halfway to Arkansas, and I had checked over everything. We were hooked up to the car, and it was fine. And Mom, for some reason, just decided to ask me to check the hitch. And I was in the back of the car, so I just climbed over into the back area, and she rolled the window down
From the front seat.
The back in those days with station wagons, the windows would roll down. And I'm looking out at the hitch, and she puts it in drive and starts rolling the window up, and I'm not done. And I was like, and so she finally hears me back there and starts to put it down. And for like the next 5 minutes, she's laughing hysterically, and I'm throwing myself in the floor, having a tantrum, going, "Hey, you could have killed me." But she thought it was hilarious.
And he said, "Mama, you'd laughed if you'd cut my head off." And I remember those words as well as anything. Okay, who's next? Diane,
Where
you too?
where are you with your story there, Mama?
Well, you go ahead and tell the story that you want to tell about the drink of milk.
Oh, well, I think my relationship with Dad, he was always scaring the pants off of me. I don't care what we were doing. So anyway, it was, close to bedtime, and we had one of those refrigerators that had the freezer on top and the refrigerator on the bottom, right? So I had opened the refrigerator door and I was pouring my milk and I took a drink and he had snuck around underneath the door and then jumped up and said, boo, and milk went everywhere.
Oh, no.
Everywhere. But he was always just scaring the bejesus out of me.
Now you can tell them about the walkway up
About the, okay, all right. So that same night, that wasn't enough. That same night, I get into bed and I'm thinking, okay, I've got to get him back. I've got to get him back. So I wait till Mom and Dad are in bed down the hallway and I open the door ever so carefully. And I've been dancing, so everything is in working order. All the muscles are working. And I bellied down the hall. You've seen the cats and you know, that belly down the hall and just the paws are moving. This is what I did. All the way down to the end of his bed, and I slithered up the bed, and I was going to scare him, and he looks up and he says, what are you doing down there? Scared me to death.
Okay, Joe, you want to tell them your story?
Okay, which one?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, which one? Yeah.
About the bubble gum.
Oh, okay. Well, one time we were going on a camping trip, and Dad was driving. We were in this big, I think it was a 1970. I drove it in high school, but it had a 350, and it had power brakes, and there were the power brakes that you just looked at the brake pedal, and it would throw you through the windshield. I mean, it was really crazy. Well, something happened along the way, and I had ADD way back then even, and so I was in my own little world doing something, and I'd taken my bubble gum out that I was chewing, and it was in my hand, and I was just looking at it or something. And then so anyway, there was some sort of a, you know, very emergency stopping of cars ahead, and he slammed on the brakes, and my hand went like this. And so the bubble gum back in those days was made out of something we don't know about. And so the rest of the trip, all the other, well, I think it was Diane and Mom mainly, they tried ice, they tried different sorts of makeup removers and everything, and finally had to cut all my eyelashes and eyebrows out
To get the gum out.
And then Dad turns to Mom and says, oh, by the way, Joe, you know that eyelashes don't grow back.
Oh, well.
Yeah, he
Which
did.
is a
And
lie.
then
He
Yeah,
had
I have very long eyelashes,
Yes,
so I
that's
think
true.
that's what it was
That was-
from.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yep, yep, yep.
And now here's Andy.
Andy, where are you? There you are, sweetheart.
I was listening
Tell them
to
about
those stories,
the snake
and I was,
when you were mowing the grass.
No, I was listening to them tell their stories, and I was thinking to myself, I love to antagonize Dad. By the
That's
time
true.
I was much older,
And he was the only one that could do it without getting in
He
trouble.
was wanting me to wash the car, and so I washed the car, but I left the wheels alone, and he was having a come apart. You know, why in the hell haven't you washed the wheels? And I just simply said, well, they're going to get dirty anyway, and walked off.
Yeah.
Not about
Yeah, it was
that.
one of those moments. Maybe I shouldn't have pushed so far, but it was, for me, it was great. Yeah, they're going to get dirty again.
Yeah.
Anybody else got any of your other stories? We did laugh a lot, and our first years were just enjoying the children and moving and packing and moving and packing. But it ended up to be a sad ending, but at the same time, if you look back, you can see the happiness that was there. Ernie retired, but he continued to pass gas. And we lived in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and then Columbia, Missouri. He retired again, and we went back to Fort Rucker, Alabama, or Enterprise, and lived there many years. He was the supervisor of keeping the helicopters in the air when there was an emergency and OR recovery. He then retired even again and wanted to hunt ducks, but he began to feel bad, and he always stayed with his best friend in Duckland, Mr. Clyde Drinkwater.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike is here today, and Miss Dr. Bill Shriver. That's the two men that are left from their group.
And Mr. Harrison.
And no
Mr.
matter
Harrison?
what
Mr. Har-
happened,
Mr.
the
Harrison.
Harrison's here,
came
Mama.
forward. Oh,
Harrison.
excuse me, Harrison. I beg your pardon. And Harrison was there too. They got lost. They lost the keys to the car. They fell in. They didn't know which direction to go.
They jackknifed in the ice on a bridge.
Lost the boat. Came home without ducks many times, and that's the most heartbreaking of it all. If you're a duck hunter's wife, you know all these things are true because all of it is the same no matter what. We were married 67 years. One thing never changed. Ducks. They still fly. I'm sure, though, that the Lord has more ducks in heaven than he does even in Stuttgart, Arkansas. I thank you all for being here. You've been precious. Thank
Thank you, Joe. You've done yourself proud, Joe.
you. Thank you very much. Susie, you go ahead and pass them out. We have a duck collar for every one of you. I had these in my house, and a little girl came to visit the house, and she said, "What's this?" I said, "A duck collar." She was blowing on the wrong end, and it didn't do anything. She said, "This is no good. It doesn't hurt." And she was 5 years old. She turned it around and blew on the
thinking
duck
about it.
collar.
The
She
pressure's
even
on.
knew. There you go.
Wow.
I
That's
think I
good.
could probably do that. Needs to be tuned.
Yeah, just a little out of tune.
I was gonna say, I'll come back.
Out of tune. They are not supposed to